Welcome to the Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast.
Adventure racing is the team part. It's the taking a group of like-minded individuals, putting them in stressful situations, and how can they make more, how can 4 people behave as 5 people because of the connections that they have between them?
Well, for me, the action is the juice. I'm in.
Okay, you people sit tight, hold the fort, and keep the home fires burning. And if we're not back by dawn, call the president.
As listeners of the Dark Zone know, we are huge fans of Ascend Athletics and their work with women and girls in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Their theme for November is Elevate Through Education. With internet access and English skills, Ascend girls can unlock previously inaccessible opportunities, including furthering online education. Fundraise will provide English lessons for alumni and internet capabilities so they can continue education and stay connected to global opportunities. Check out ascendathletics.org. That's one word, ascendathletics.org, to check out all their opportunities. And remember, Ascend pays nothing for this spot. The Dark Zone is just happy to support their work. The Dark Zone is happy to support and partner with AR School. What is AR School? Well, it's an online service that ensures that you have access to the expertise that you need so you as an adventure racer can continue to level up. We all know that progress can be slow, so why waste time repeating mistakes or wondering if you're using the right tactics? AR School brings together world-class training, top competitors, and athletes of all levels. It's like a transition area between races where you can learn what works, share your expertise, and fuel your passion alongside other racers. AR School is launching soon. So join me and several top competitors inside AR School by joining the waitlist at www.thearschool.com. That's thearschool.com. Hard to believe it. Episode 107 of the Dark Zone. We are kicking around November 2024, heading into the off season. Our plan for the next 2 episodes is to bring the stoke. We have a catalog, a backlog, if you will, of a lot of different racers and interviews and big races and small racers and veteran racers and newer racers. And our job going into 2024, into 2025, is to keep bringing the stoke, bring the excitement. This is what we do in between races, and we listen to the Dark Zone and we talk to each other and we train and we dream and we plan. And whether it be a 6-hour race or a 4-hour race or a 6-day race or a 10-day race, who cares? Adventure racing is adventure racing, and the sport continues to grow. So we hope that you use the Dark Zone as a training tool, as a learning tool, and we are so happy that you're here. Keep in mind that the Dark Zone will never cost any money to anybody. It is our gift back to the sport, a sport that we love a lot, a sport that teaches us a lot, and we hope that you enjoy it as much as we do. Megan is a great interview, quite the trajectory in her racing. She loves to train, she loves to be outdoors, and she loves to be a good teammate. So sit back and relax and enjoy this episode of the Dark Zone. And remember, everybody, if you keep racing, we'll keep talking. Welcome to the Dark Zone Adventure Racing Podcast. This is your host, Brian Gatens. Our guest today is Megan Moir. Megan hails from Vermont, which is Northeast United States. I've had a chance to know Megan and to race with her in multiple races over the course of years. And she is, audience, she is one of the most recommended to me people that I should have on the show. This is a voice for radio, not for air. But if you saw her face right now, her eyebrows kind of popped up when I said that. So she's surprised to hear that as well. And the reason why Megan is invited to be on the show is that she follows what her trajectory of adventure racing that she follows along the way. We absolutely love. We'll get into the conversation with her. She'll talk a bit about herself in a bit, but I have a feeling that she's going to share with us what adventure racing means to her and why she throws herself into it with such aplomb and such hard work. So Megan, after blowing you up that way and saying what a great person, how much people love you, tell us all about yourself. Welcome to the Dark Zone.
Thank you, Brian. It's a huge pleasure. You were the voice of my survival time in COVID, when I sort of latched on to adventure racing as my lifeline to get me through were some pretty challenging times. And so it's an honor and tickled pink to be here chatting with you.
So walk us through in a broad swath your adventure racing career so far. How did you get into it? When did you pick it up? What was your entry into the sport like? How did you end up here today?
Great question. I have always played sports, many team sports, soccer, rugby, hockey, watched Eco Challenge, of course, with my dear dad, who was also an avid cyclist, runner, outdoors person in the late 1990s, and always had this in the back of my head, right? Oh, I want to do that. And so I think
when you say Eco Challenge, you mean the original Eco Challenge?
Oh, yeah, the original Eco Challenge. I'm pretty sure my dad would VCR it, and then he and I would watch it together. And just, he liked to push himself. I've always liked to push myself. And then with the added being in the outdoors and having that added challenge, I think it was just something that always appealed to the both of us. Fast forward many years, college, rugby, things like that. Got to Vermont. I think I did my first adventure race, 2014 with USARA, Bitter Pill, 10-hour. Just wanted to do it. Didn't have a teammate. Asked the race organizers for a teammate. Joined up with some guy I didn't know. I think our team name was Why Not? Because why not? And we did okay. I don't even remember how many checkpoints we found, how many times we got lost, but it was a good time. Think had a kiddo, Ruby, who's now 9. I came back and did the Bitter Pill in 2017. Had another kiddo in 2019. Fast forward to COVID, sitting on the couch, trying to still work while having a kindergartner at home and childcare's closed and whatnot, watching the Prime Video Eco Challenge and remembering and recalling and going and finding the book that I had, the adventure racing guide, or I forget what the title is, that was literally still on my shelf. Watched that and decided, let's do this. USARA was putting on the Hard Fall, their first 24-hour race. And so I signed up with it. I dragged a friend in who I thought would be a good partner. Interestingly enough, but I find this in adventure racing, the serendipity just yields the most amazing experiences. So she, 30 days out, said, you know what? I've bitten off more than I can chew. I haven't trained. I can't do this. And I've been putting all my eggs in this basket that's pulling me forward through COVID and through all of the stresses. And I went through my Rolodex and I thought, okay, who's likely fit enough to do a 24-hour, but also crazy enough to do a 24-hour.
I like that Venn diagram, by the way.
Yes.
Right.
And I thought of my friend Neil, who I had seen, I think in the 2017 Bitter Pill, you're in the forest, you don't realize your friend, and you're like, hey, I know you. Hey, right. I know you. Hey, how's it going? And I remembered that. And I called him and I think I don't even know if he had to think about it. He's like, yeah, sure, I'm in. Right. We do the Hard Fall. We have a hell of a good time. And at the end of that, I didn't feel wrecked. Right. I trained enough, but I wouldn't say I went crazy training. I didn't have a coach. I didn't have a training program. I just kind of tried to stay fit leading up to it. And I didn't feel wrecked. And so logically then the next one was, well, let's do a 5-day. Let's do my own personal Eco Challenge. And so I think my real foray came in 2022 doing Endless Mountains with Rootstock Racing. So
it's funny that you talk about your trajectory into the sport, right? It's not uncommon to talk to the guest on the show that finds the sport through the older Eco Challenges, right? And by the way, Mark Burnett, I know you're listening, release the tapes. We want the world wants the Eco Challenge tapes out there. And clearly that sat in your brain over time. And then eventually you woke up one day and you said, holy cow, this thing exists. So in 2014, you wanted to get into the sport. It was a 10-hour race called the Bitter Pill, as you mentioned. And you just kind of got connected with someone who you never met before for Team Why Not? Why did you feel comfortable jumping into a 10-hour race with someone who you didn't know that it was going to work out okay?
I guess I honestly don't know. I think when I want something in my life, I just figure out how to go and get it. And literally, why not? What could go wrong? It was in my home state. I generally knew the area. I think I also didn't even know what I didn't know. Like, I didn't know that you could get lost. I didn't know that you would have the dynamics that you have with that person when they get tired and hungry.
Gotcha. So any hesitation you had was not larger than your expected enjoyment of the experience. One did not cancel out the other.
Yeah. And I actually don't remember having much hesitation, but I guess that tends to be me when I decide that I want to do something. The benefits of the learning, right? You're going to learn something from it. You're going to either learn that you hate it. We have a saying at work, don't be the squirrel in the middle of the road. Don't sit there trying to decide which way you're going to go. Pick a direction, go to that side. At a minimum, you're going to learn that side is not for you, and then you'll know you need to be on the other side.
Got you. Or if you're in the middle of the road, you're going to get run over. You got to pick a path on either side.
Yep.
Okay.
Forward movement, right?
Right, exactly. Well, and the trick is keep going forward, right? That's part of the dynamic of adventure racing.
Exactly. Even you might not be going forward in the right direction, but sometimes that little bit of going forward, you realize then, we're definitely not in the right place. Then you got to backtrack. But just sitting there looking at the map for ages and ages and talking about it isn't usually going to get you exactly where you need to be.
Eventually, there has to be movement. You have to go. You have to pick a side and you have to go. So it appears to me that you're one of those racers that you took some of your own personality and that comes out inside your racing. The way you see the world comes alive then.
Yeah, I think it's been building. It's, I think adventure racing, and I was reflecting on it, before we had this chat, it's become so intertwined with like where I'm at in my life and the growth that I'm at. And it's really driven home for me the importance of learning. Like, I am happiest in my life, whether it's at work or in a relationship or with my kids, if I am making that incremental progress, right? If even a bad experience, turning it into, I learned something. One of my favorite things, I don't, call them challenging checkpoints. I call them checkpoints of learning. There's always 2 or 3 checkpoints in a race where you're like, you do have to follow the altimeter, right? If you remember what you already knew, but you forgot when you were looking for the checkpoint, like that you have to use a number of different things and you can't make the map fit to the terrain. And they're just they make me chuckle because it's like, ha ha ha. Again.
So what you're saying is that that in the manifestation of a race, when you're hit a challenging part, there's a life lesson that's kind of living in the background outside of it. Like you said something that is just so wise that I want to kind of underline a little bit. That the idea is like, don't make the map fit to what you want. You have to fit to what the map is, right? Accepting that reality.
It's hard though. It's totally hard. But I mean the intersection, you talked about Venn diagrams, the intersection between adventure racing and a management setting, because I'm a manager in a environment that has a fair amount of crisis and frequently requires adaptation, pivoting, things often don't go right. They go right until they go wrong. And in that moment of going wrong, you have to very quickly figure out how to get them back on track.
Yeah, one of the earliest things that I learned adventure racing, I think Eric Caravala, who does pack rafting adventures, and he's involved. He's the director of the Eastern Mountain Wilderness Challenge. We did a race one time where he was part of the volunteer staff race directorship, and he was following our team just to follow us, see how we were doing. And he commented after the race that what he learned in adventure racing, he saw us do it, is that adventure racing is not about error avoidance, but error correction, right? The idea that it's going to go haywire somewhere. It's fixing yourself inside that dynamic, which then, to your point, spills into your life outside, and your outside life kind of spills into your adventure racing.
Absolutely.
So what was your biggest delta? What was the biggest gap when you first started adventure racing? Clearly, you had a lot of attributes going into the sport that you enjoyed, right? You had the physical component down enough that you could enjoy 10 hours. You had the attitude with the teammate. What did you have to do? What did you have to close in order to be a better adventure racer?
Probably the biggest thing is hills on the bike. I grew up in Houston, Texas, which is flat as a pancake. I did a lot of cycling, road cycling there, and I can go really, really, really fast on the flat. But I don't know if it's my muscle fibers. When I see a hill, they go, ah! And so really overcoming, not necessarily a fear of hills, but just that mental, like,
right.
I can do this. It's going to feel different, getting used to that pain, getting used to being uncomfortable. Maybe there's people who are very comfortable when they're climbing hills, but even now when I'm sort of at my peak fitness, still not like a fun thing to do.
It sounds like a body geometry issue. It sounds like a fitness issue. It sounds like you're not used to it. And I have to give you credit. For those listeners who don't know it, there isn't a single flat piece of Vermont, right? And so the idea of living in Vermont, I laugh when you say you don't like hills because you live in Vermont, which everything either goes up or it goes down.
Yes, I have hills in my background to this picture. So, hiking up hills has always been fun because I've done a lot of hiking in other places, but the biking on hills, been working a lot with Jen Seeger. That was sort of one of my things that I listed when she's like, what is your biggest challenge? And it's biking on hills. And I've seen great progress and how I feel on a hill now, or particularly how I feel after I climb a hill, right? I could always do it, but then afterwards I would just be like tanked.
Right.
And now I climb a hill and I'm like, oh, that wasn't that much fun, but I made it to the top and I can keep going. And I don't feel like I now have to, recover a whole bunch.
So going back in time and realizing that 2014 was a 10-hour race and you had two children in between. We're now 10 years later. When did you begin formal AR training? When did you go from like sampling your physical growth to actually deciding to work with a coach? How many years now has that been?
I think that was just 2 years. I'm in my second year. So I think, yes, I started with Jen Seeger for 2023 and getting ready for my second Endless Mountains. Which was in 2023.
So what was the biggest change with a coach? What did you find, aside from the actual getting better at all the parts of the race? What did having a coach do for you that you think you would not have been able to do on your own?
I think it's provided the consistency. My life is crazy busy with 2 kids and I, coach soccer, and my job is a crazy, crazy job where I love the content of the job, but the volume is literally drinking from the fire hose, which we joke about because I run a drinking water utility in addition to wastewater and stormwater. So just having that accountability. There's weeks where I don't necessarily do all of the workouts. I can't get to all of the workouts, but it is a good check-in of like, oh, need to get back on track the next weekend.
Yeah, I think
or the next week.
I think having the idea of having a coach is you sub your brain out to somebody else.
Well, exactly. And for a while, I think between, after playing rugby and hockey, the thing I did in between getting into adventure racing again was CrossFit. And I love CrossFit for that reason. Like, I think when I was younger, I could go make myself do really crazy things, but now it's much easier because of all the mental load I have as a mom and a manager. Tell me what to do. I'll go do it. Just tell me what to do. I can't, and tell me when to do it, and know that there's all these different opportunities, particularly with CrossFit. There's so many different classes. You don't really have an excuse of like, oh, I couldn't get to a class because there's like 8 classes a day. So just environment for success, pushing you forward towards your goals.
Gotcha. Having a sense of structure there, working with the team and the community, being part of that whole thing there. So clearly your trajectory has been very strong. We jump into bigger and bigger races. And if I understand correctly, you did the 2022 Endless Mountains 5-day race, and you did 22. So of the 2 editions of Endless Mountains, you've done both of those editions. Yes,
and I'm definitely planning on doing the upcoming one.
The 2025 edition, which is going to be June of 2025. So my question to you is this: what did you find between your 2022 Endless Mountains and your 2023 Endless Mountains? Same race, got to put same in quotes, right? But same distance, different races. What was the biggest change you saw between those 2 race experiences?
Probably fitness, which just made my race experience better, right? Not to say, I had a fantastic time for 2022, and we should talk about that because I need to give shout outs to Sherry and Pete.
Well, go for it. Go right now. Who was your 2022 team?
So 2022 was actually supposed to be Diana Driscoll and Donna Boots. And last minute, Donna had something that took her away, a family emergency. So it was just me and Diana. And we were like, let's do it. It was both our first 5-day races. But we were committed to doing it. We said, let's give it a shot. Serendipitously, Pete and Sherry, I think they had lost their 3rd or their 4th person. And so they were a team of 2. And so we did what often happens is we married up. And I think It would be interesting to know, had that not happened, what my experience would have been. Not that Diana wasn't a great teammate, but the added benefit of Sherry and Pete and their just years and years of experience, as well as Pete's amazing tow line to pull me up the hills, made it so we got to the finish line. I think we skipped mandatories. It was about getting to the finish line and having the experience. But I owe so much to those two. And also showing that you can laugh while suffering, which I find probably be the most healing part of adventure racing. It's finding the humor. Yeah.
It's great. I've had the chance to race with all three of your teammates. I've raced with them in the past, and I do agree with you that the level of experience that comes to the table, the attitude comes towards the table, is when you're able to marry the physical component of capacity, right? You have to have the capacity to it. When you marry that capacity to great attitude and seeing the joy in it, it ends up being a great experience.
Yes.
And so it sounds like your 2022 Endless Mountains was just exactly what you wanted it to be. Solid teammate with Diana, jumping in with Pete and with Sherry. I've raced with Pete and Sherry across continents, right? We've been there. We were in Ozark together. We were in Scotland together. A great way to do it. And I do recommend for the newer racer out there, I think one thing that I was very fortunate with in the beginning too, and I'll say it here, was my first race with a guy named Dan Brannon. And I think this was 12, 13 years ago now. It's all kind of a blur. And Dan had a lot of experience as an adventure racer. And I just signed up, much like your Why Not experience. I just agreed to race with Dan. I called up and they connected the two of us and off we go. I think I can't emphasize enough the idea of working with someone who has some time in the sport, who has a great attitude, it's a great way to learn about the sport, that it's not just go 1,000% of the time, but you can race well and enjoy yourself along the way.
I think particularly for the long races, I think I would tell the folks who are trying to get into it, join up with your friend from down the street for a 3-hour or 6-hour, even a 10-hour. You're not going to get into trouble. You're not going to get into the deep darkness where you need somebody who has that experience to pull you out. But I do think ideally, certainly for expedition racing, maybe for 24-hour, although, I did my first 24-hour with my friend Neil and we didn't know exactly what we were getting into, and we survived. But I think we're also a little bit of, just based on who we are as people. Certain people, I think, can show up and just push through. And
right, you could do the 24 with them. As you had enough relationship fiber built between you that yes. 24 hours was easy to do.
And I knew he was a creative problem solver, right? There was two problem solvers going into a situation where you're going to encounter problems like Lake Willoughby having 3-foot waves and your boat filling up and having to pull over multiple times to dump out your.
That's quite the problem solve.
Yeah. We also found great metaphors because at the time we both worked, I think, for the city of Burlington. And we're like, oh, this is like being at work where your boat's filling up with water and you have one tiny water bottle to
go quicker. So what did you find? So inside the 5-day race experience, what did you learn about when it came to like self-care, your nutrition, your body? Like what did you learn about yourself and how you could keep yourself together for the 120 hours of the race?
A lot. I think in addition to consuming all Dark Zone episodes, Burf Barf, anything I could get my hands on for that year. I mean, I think every night when I went to bed, I was doing some amount of research or learning. AR on AR, Adam Rose on AR. I watched all of his videos.
And by the way, you just ticked off great resources out there. Burf Barf, TA with Randy Erickson, AR and AR with Adam Rose. Yeah, you checked all those great. Those are really good.
So I learned from all of that. The foot care piece, adhered pretty closely to the pre-race prep of lathering the feet and wearing socks, even though I hate wearing socks when I sleep. I learned also some key things that I learned and I'm still working through and I'm eager to try them out for 2025 Endless is when you get really, really, really tired on the bike. I actually experienced a lot of anxiety. Like my body felt anxious because my body wanted to be asleep, but it's like you're on a bike. And so. Yeah, you push it against that natural desire where I hear you on that. I had to go really, really slowly, which then kicks up the ego and the embarrassment of like, I'm making my team go slowly, but I'm still trying to go forward. So I know in 2023, it took me a little while, but towards the end, I was starting to experiment with like the right amounts of caffeine, like even just taking 25 milligrams of caffeine, just half of a run gum, kept me in a more awake zone. The other thing I learned was, and I remember talking with Sherry about it, and she just said, you have to get used to the feeling. It's almost like motion sickness, right? When you're going and you're going and you're going and you're going, and then you finally stop, your body feels like it's been on a boat, and it feels weird. And you have to just know that that's okay. You're not having a cardiac event, right? It's a normal thing. But just having those experiences and accumulating that, I know a lot of your guests talk about it, being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah. I always like the idea, like you're on the go all day and you decide you're going to sleep for a couple hours just to catch some shut eye. And your body's like, wait a minute, we've been going for 36 straight hours. Now you want me to do nothing?
Yeah. And it feels weird. Like you feel your heart's still going and all of this other stuff. So it's just some weird sensations that, despite having played some rough sports like rugby and pushed really hard, I was literally pushing my limits and experiencing physical aspects that I hadn't ever experienced before, which is both scary, but also like, okay, this is new. Let's figure out if there's a solution to it.
Got it. And so you took your 2022 experience and then you folded into who was your 2023 team? Who'd you go with then?
The 2023 was the Crackerjack team of Olga Huber, Donna Boots, Allie Corain, and myself.
And how did that go for you?
That was great. We, I think, built on my experience and my the finish at 2022, where I think we were, we didn't get all the mandatories. We just, we're an official finisher, but didn't get all the mandatories. And in 2023, we were able to get all the mandatories, plus I think a few more. And so, hey, as you said, upward trajectory.
And so clearly having the 2022 experience, and you mentioned the word serendipity before, right? And the idea that I always like to say, and I've heard this before, that if you go into the sport with, a good attitude and you want to be a good teammate, and if you want to work really well, those teammates will show up for you, right? You will attract like-minded people along the way, and you sort of get a sense of who you are. As in terms of being a good teammate for 2023 and working well with your fellow racers there, what did you have to bring to the table that helped the team keep moving forward so well? What was your role?
Interesting you asked that, because I think one of the things I've been reflecting on, because I'm going to be racing again with Olga for nationals, is that co-navigator relationship, and particularly having somebody who is really, really strong in navigation like Olga. I mean, she's amazing. She can hold a line. I still don't know exactly how she do it, other than she has like a homing beacon in her body, and how her mind works, and figuring out when the right time was for trying to learn and help, and when, because it's a 5-day race and the person's tired. And she and I talked a bit about this afterwards. She's like a fine dining chef, right? And asking her questions at the wrong time, learning kind of when to shut my mouth and when not to, which I think is huge, because I, was always approaching it from an intention of being helpful. This is what I'm excited about for nationals: is what can Megan do in any given moment to help the team move forward, right? And if that means hands off, carrying more stuff, and not necessarily participating in navigation, then I want to explore that. I love navigation. I love the keeping my mind busy, because I think it helps with the physical pain. But I'm going into nationals with the intention of like giving it my all physically, and finding all of those other ways that I can be a good teammate, and not just as the navigator.
Right. And the idea of knowing inside the event itself the best role for you to play at that time for the team. You may want one thing, but the team may need another thing. Exactly.
Yep. And I think that happened over the course of the 5 days, but in hindsight, I would have liked to kind of shift that earlier, and be a little bit more nimble in figuring out, again, what is the role I can serve that is going to best help the team go forward. Right. I do think humor. I often can bring a little humor to most situations, whether it's at work or on the course, and I think that's important, because if you can't laugh at yourself, then what kind of life are we leading?
Right. And keeping things kind of light along the way, right? I always like to say that you take the race seriously. You don't take yourself too seriously.
Yes.
Right? And bringing that into that experience. What have you found along the way when you watch other teams in action, right? Because clearly, I think watching adventure racing is a close second to actually being an adventure racer itself. I love being in a TA. I love seeing teams interact. When you look around during a race and you see when things are either going really well for a team or really poorly for a team, what have you picked up inside that team's behavior that has helped your own racing?
I mean, I think the thing I really like is when you see people being helpful. Like if somebody's really fast in a TA and then quickly transitions to not just asking somebody what they need, but like knowing what they need, right? Because sometimes
that's a really good point. Yep.
If you're staring at your bike box and you're tired, you don't actually know what the next thing is. And so somebody particularly with experience being like, I'm going to get water, I'm grabbing your water bottles and going and doing that. I think people also moving through the tiffs or the difficulties that you might have on course, as well as, and I think about a lot of this with rugby. I was watching the women's sevens today.
Sevens. Yeah. But by the way, for those who are listening, this is during the Olympics, right? Where this will come out after the Olympics, but the rugby 7 team and some breakout stars they have there are amazing.
Yes. So in rugby and in adventure racing, like I was taught early on, you're going to make a mistake. You're going to miss a tackle. You have 2 options. You can get down on yourself and then not participate in the rest of the match, or you can make your next move positive and kind of undo the whatever damage you did. And I think being able to quickly move through that, like as a navigator, you're gonna mess up. You're gonna take the wrong line. You're gonna do a parallel error. And if you then dwell in that mistake, you're not gonna move forward efficiently. You have to like my rugby coach, she used to slap her leg and say, "Oh shoot." And then she was done with it. It was her sort of cue, like, okay, I've processed it. No point living in the past. I'm moving forward. So
it's the idea like of that. That's a really good point. And I'm writing it down while we're talking. And this is not meant towards a person, but don't hold an in-race grudge against yourself.
Against yourself or anybody else.
Right.
I mean, here's a little secret. I had to learn this very quickly. 2022 Enlist. We're on the bus and we're looking at everything. And I realized that on my first race, I had left the course rules in the hotel, in the dorm room, right? And my teammate was like, "Are you kidding me?" And I had to, I started to like shame spiral, like, "Oh, great, I messed this up." And then what good is that going to do? We're still going to race. And in the end, we joined up with Pete and Sherry, and they had a course rules book. Of course, a day later, their course rules book fell to the bottom of Sherry's backpack and got completely soaked. And so then we were down to one soggy course rules book.
Yeah, it's like transparent, holding up to the sun. It's like you can see through it.
Yeah, we were drawing it out like, so, I mean, stuff's going to happen. And it's other than the learning that you need to take away from it, you don't want to just discard that. Like, I didn't discard it. I made sure we had our course rules book, or I think I gave it to somebody else for 2023. I was like, I'm not being in charge of this.
It was like toxic. It was like radioactive. Like, don't give me this. You take this.
Like, do the learning and then move on.
Right. And I think the point too, I think from a teammate perspective, is that most teammates recognize that in the wonderfully complex chaos of an adventure race situation, and I don't care if it's 3 hours, 10 hours, 5 days, 10 days, all these systems kind of collapse in on each other, and there's going to be this kind of frenetic nature of the race. And sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't. The idea that inside that event, things are going to go haywire and you have to learn from it. But I think for a lot of teammates, the deal breaker then is if a teammate makes the same mistake over and over again. And then you got to say to yourself, like, what are we doing here?
No, absolutely. Well, that's where the learning comes in, right? You can make a slightly different version of that mistake. As long as it's a little bit
it's still different. Right. Yeah. I didn't forget the rule book this time. I left the maps, but hey, you can't get on me for that one. It's 2 separate things. So when you see that, and you pointed the idea that teammates, that they take care of each other along the way inside the TA, and they clean up with each other, they organize for each other. What have you seen when it's just gone poorly? Like when you say to yourself, "Oh goodness gracious, I will never do that as a teammate." That's a lesson I learned about how not to act as an adventure racer. What would you point to?
Here's one. The like leaving somebody behind, even if they're still within range. And I saw this in a recent race where their teammate was, several hills behind. They could maybe still see them. And I know what it feels like to be that last person. And it's demoralizing, and it doesn't help them move forward faster. The best thing you can do is stick somebody behind them and have them, encouraged to come along.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you could do a whole podcast on in race strategies to keep the team as close together as possible. Like, where do you put the slow person? If it's a 4-person team, where do they sort of stand? Should they be the 4th person? Should they be the 1st person when they're trekking? I think that's a really valid point, because that's just a morale killer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's one thing, like on a bike, I think we have some agreements of, everybody kind of needs to maintain their cadence. Like, right. I will acknowledge, like, go slow down when you get to the top of the hill. I'm going to get there. Right. And now with Jen Sager, I'm not necessarily the last one, but, certainly my first race, I was like, okay, I'll get there when I get there. Yeah. But you need to have those agreements, particularly with trekking. It just, like, it feels icky. Even if your team's great, but when you pass a team like that and you see that going on, or you see people not taking care of each other, or they're yelling at each other, or they're just body language, like somebody standing, sighing, clearly waiting for this person that is their teammate, like it or not. Like,
right. You agreed to be here together, right? So you agreed to work together. Okay.
I think you need to, we were talking before about figuring out yourself, what you need to give to the team to make it move forward faster. But like, what can you do for that person, whether it's taking their weight or cheering them up, or sometimes just, distracting them from their pain by chatting them up. Right. Donna Boots is really great about that. She's a good, sheepdog coming and checking on you and engaging you in conversation, so that you kind of forget that you're in, the hurt cave.
How much conversation do you have with your teammates before the race actually starts?
With Diana, I don't think we had a ton, because I think we also didn't realize the importance of that. With 2023 Nationals, I don't remember, but we met a couple of times. We also did like a whole disc analysis. Olga brought her partner in to do that for us, so we could kind of see where we fit.
Say more about that.
I can't remember all of the different things, but it's like dominance. There's different categories of sort of your personality, and it was really just understanding what our personalities were going in.
So that's interesting. So you did an actual kind of a formal personality analysis before the race itself.
Yeah. So like, we knew going into it probably that Olga and I were going to have, because we occupy similar zones, that we were the most likely to potentially butt heads or have more opportunities for learning.
Right. Because you lived in the same space.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Interesting. And so knowing that going into the race was pretty powerful.
It was. And then there were like examples, especially reflecting back on the race. It was like, oh, that's probably why that was happening.
Okay. That's what that meant. That was going on here. You sort of had a sense. And so looking back, you did a pre-race analysis. You had the race itself. And then looking back, it made a lot of sense to you.
Yeah. And then we did have a team debrief where I think we talked about some of the things, but it was actually later when Olga and I were trying to figure out around nationals, because we had qualified as Team Ubuntu to race in nationals. And so she was on, she was part of that team. I was part of that team. And we were trying to figure out, are we going to race? Are we going to go for it again or not? And so we sort of had a great heart to heart about what we saw in each other as teammates, and about how we feel like we have more to learn from one another. Largely because there is a little bit of tension and conflict, which I think there is or I've heard there is when you get into this co-navigation situation, is really understanding how that's going to work going into it. And then literally navigating co-navigation throughout.
Yeah, it's an interesting call. Like the idea of firstly, I'm not the team navigator. If I have a map in my hands and we're figuring things out, we're in deep trouble. Let's put it that way. But I've seen a lot of navigation take place, and I will tell you that co-navigation works really, really well for a lot of teams, but there has to be a really specific situation. The personalities have to match really, really well, and they have to have shared success.
Yeah.
Because if they disagree over it and we're going to go in this direction and it falls apart, well, it's now adversarial navigating. I want this, but I want this. And so I think you're right about that, that in the stress of a race, when co-navigation desires meet in the middle, it could go really, really great, right? Two brains are better than one, except when they're not.
Yes, and I think the pressure of a 5-day race is different. So co-navigation has gone very well when race with Olga on the shorter races, right? Just because I think there wasn't the pressure and all of the mental load of all the stuff you're trying to figure out. Yeah. And so it is a little bit like handing off a meal. I've been cooking this meal, handing it off to somebody, getting it back. I think it can work, and I'm eager to see if it can work. Because I think I have, again, Olga is a fantastic navigator. I am trying to learn from her, and I think I do offer some other perspectives. But I'm really excited to, as I said, I'm excited to see myself in a non-navigation role. I want to try that on. I haven't done that yet, but I think it's important. Like, it's good to be a utility player.
It's a great place to be, and you're never going to go back.
My mind.
What do you want me to carry heavy stuff? You've come to the right guy. Where are we going?
My mind is always going, and so I'm curious what the experience is going to be.
Well, it's going to be hard for you when you think things are going wrong. It's going to be hard for you to give your navigator grace to let it go wrong.
Yes, which I think is also an important life lesson for who I am and how I walk through the world, and the role that I have usually been put in or selected for myself, right? In other aspects of my life, am the navigator.
Right.
And so I've been practicing that a lot as a manager, of sitting back and seeing where somebody is taking us and not necessarily stopping them. And
I mean, I've been in a race situation where I'm kind of like, we'll see if this works out. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I've also realized that interjecting at that time is not the right thing to do.
Yes, and that's something I'm also practicing in my life, is the right time. But again, I can't say enough about Olga's skill as a navigator and her strength as a teammate. I mean, she's a beast.
She's so strong. I mean, Olga Huber, Team Fragile Flowers, one of the best names of venture racing. She's on a very short list of AR guests to get on here. Her time will come eventually, Olga. I know you're out there. So you mentioned a team name before, Team Ubuntu. And in our conversation before we started recording, you mentioned that there was a philosophy that spoke to you about the use of that word and what it meant to you. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, the way I think of Ubuntu, which is an African philosophy, it's I think it translates roughly to I am because we are, that you can't exist on your own. You are who you are because of your community, because of these relationships that we have. And I just think that just resonates a lot with me and adventure racing. Yes, you can do a solo race, but to me, solo racing, while it is a good tool for pushing yourself physically and particularly navigation, like I did my first solo race, just to kind of see what I knew and what I didn't know. Yeah,
it's a crash course in that, because you only have yourself to turn to.
Yeah, but I don't see it as adventure racing. Adventure racing is the team part. It's the taking a group of like-minded individuals, putting them in stressful situations, and how can they make more, how can 4 people behave as 5 people because of the connections that they have between them.
Right. And how does the group respond to the challenges that you find there? And so what you're saying there is that the idea behind that proverb, that philosophy, the idea is that you're very interested in realizing what can we individually become as a group and then go forward.
Yeah. To multiply, that the sum is greater than or what is it?
The whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
There you go. Exactly. Right. Like, thank you. Well done.
Thank you. And so Team Ubuntu, if I understand correctly, did a very nice result at the most recent longest day, which was put on there.
Yeah, so that was me and my pal Neil, my crazy fit friend Neil.
Okay, and then so the longest day is put on by NYRA, New York Adventure Racing Association. It was held recently. It was in the Adirondack Park, which is a tough place to get permits. So kudos to NYRA for getting the permits. Adirondack Park, for the listener, is an area in New York State. It's a swath of wilderness that's bigger than the state of Massachusetts. It's really big. and I was able to secure permits for that. You had a great experience. I saw the final results. Tell us about how that race went for you. And here's what brings you onto the show. Your experience was so strong compared to your trajectory of growth. You had a fantastic result. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, we managed to pull off, I think, first in the Coed division, which is not what we were going for. We were just going out to have a good time and get as many checkpoints as possible. I think my biggest learning, though, from that was, other than maybe it was Endless Mountains 2023, I've been very lucky weather-wise. I haven't had to race in rainy weather nonstop.
and this race took care of that.
Yes, this checked the box on, yes, I can be in rain for whatever, 20, 22 hours. And it was okay. It wasn't miserable and my feet didn't fall apart. And so that was my biggest success moment, was now when I have a race and I'm looking at the weather, there's not going to be any panic about whether or not.
So that bar was kind of raised for you, right? The idea of what you can or not tolerate. Because for the listener at home, I had the chance to comment from a distance on that race, and I followed it really closely. And you could clarify if I'm right about this. It was either overcast, raining, or wet until the final 15 minutes of the race, and then the sun came out.
Yes, I think, maybe like an hour or two, and then the sun came out and was really hot.
Right. And all of a sudden it's humid.
Steaming.
Right. Yeah, everything gets warmed up on. And so what did you find? So talk a bit about that, the idea that it kind of broke you through a barrier. You went through a ceiling effect that where all of a sudden you could deal with that sort of cold weather. What other barriers like that kind of exist, do you still think? What is the thing that's not yet happened to you that you wonder about?
I think major bike mechanical. Haven't had that. I'll say for the female listeners out there, also for the last Endless Mountains, it was the first time where my monthly was coming right on the start day.
It arrived during the race, so you had to manage that from a physical component.
And I'm like, are you kidding me? But Jen was like, you're at your strongest. And I was like, okay. And it was okay. And it's just, one more thing to manage when you're already feeling like you're managing a lot. But again, that's the name. The whole sport is, you can do hard things. Anything that gets thrown at you, guess what? If you believe in yourself and you believe in your teammates, you're going to get through to the other side. It might suck while you're getting through, but if you keep that positive attitude and that forward momentum. In rugby, I played rugby for a team in Boston, and our motto was go forward, support, which probably could be another adventure racing team name, right? You're constantly trying to move forward, and then you're making sure that there's people on both sides of you to support. So if you're getting tackled, you can dish off the ball, and that person can carry it for a little bit, and then you're getting your body up and you're running to support them. And it's just this constant cycle that keeps going more and more. And I was thinking today, of all of the sports that I played, rugby and adventure racing have a lot of similarities in that you've got a team of 15 women, all different shapes and size, all different skill levels that come together to move this ball down the field and to get hit literally to the deck. You have to get back up. You got to sprint across the field and do it all over again. Got it.
But I'm the father of a rugby. My daughter played rugby when she was at university. And for those who listen to the podcast, she's actually the laughing intro in the beginning of the show. So thank you, Meg Gatens, for doing that. And I had the chance to watch a lot of rugby matches. And I do agree with you that the idea of working as a unit, as a team, and to your point, moving forward is dependent upon the teammates around you. But the moving forward was a choice and an option. And that's, I think, the point that you're making here as we speak with each other, that there's going to be challenge along the way, but it's the whether or not you move forward is a choice being made by the people around that team, and not by anything outside of you. Mm-hmm. So exactly. Nationals coming up. Nationals right around the corner. So strong result at the longest day, right? It's always nice to win. Always nice to be in the top of the podium, as we say. My job. All right, kids, you know what's fun? Winning's fun, right? So it's nice to win. What does your Nationals team look like? Who are you racing with?
It's Olga Huber and Kim Stewart.
Okay, so Olga and Kim, and now what is that? What is your planning like now? Because we're going to do a lot of coverage for Nationals going into it, and this will come out long before
nationals. But for those who are looking at nationals, and it's going to be a big field, I think it might be the biggest nationals field ever. I don't want to be wrong about that. Yeah, it's going to be great down in Snowshoe down in West Virginia. What are you doing in advance of that race to get ready?
I'm actually looking forward to that because Olga did Alaska. So she's just coming off of that. And she was very focused on getting ready for that race and certainly wanted to give her space for that. And I think once she gets back and has a little bit of time, looking forward to, we've already chatted once, Olga, Kim, and myself, just about our goals and about our desire to kind of push it a little bit, you know?
So will you be doing other races together or will you do training days together?
I don't think so. I don't know that there's going to be room for that. I am doing the hard fall with my pal Neil coming up in a couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. So I think we have obviously I've raced with Olga. I don't think she's raced with Kim, but my main experience with Kim has been with her as a solo. She and I did Tug Hill both as a solo and had similar results and checkpoints and time. So we know at least there's that compatibility there. On the physical side. And anytime I've talked to her, she has a great attitude, which sort of checks my boxes of somebody's going to show up physically ready and mentally ready with their attitude.
That's just a dream, right? A teammate that you could hang with each other back and forth and you're in the right place mentally. It's like and it could be 30-hour nationals. It could be a 5-day race, right? As long as that combination exists going forward is really, it's enjoyable. It's possible. So
in a perfect world, we would have a training day together, but I'm not overly worried.
It's what it's going to be, right? Right. Well, eventually, too, and I think it's good for the listener to hear this, is that when you do enough adventure racing, you kind of fall into a kind of a plug and play mentality where you know enough about yourself, your capacity, your self-care, that you kind of plug yourself easily into a team. Right. And there's a whole swath of racers. And I would put you in the same category, too. I could see you very easily getting a phone call with you and say, listen, we need a third, we need a fourth, I need a teammate. Can you come along? And you're like, have bike will travel, right? You have the experience, nutrition, the gear. Where are we going? And off you go.
Yes. That is my goal is always to be ready for that call that's going to happen. So no, I'm super excited. I think also after doing expedition races, not that 24 or 30 hour races should be dismissed, but they seem so much simpler, than the 5 days that, I think if doing a 5-day with a team, there is a lot of logistics. There is a lot of need for getting together Zoom calls beforehand to really talk things through the logistics of it. But it's a little easier with the.
Well, I think it's a normal human reaction, right? I think if to use another sports analogy, if you run marathons very often, if there's a 10K in your neighborhood, you're like, well, I can do a 10K. Like you build your capacity, you expand your boundaries enough that you could drop into 24-hour race and you can do that effectively. But I will point out, I do remember when I did my first 18-hour race and someone's racing for 24 hours. I'm like, that's crazy. I'd never race for 24 hours. Next thing you know, you race for 120 hours and things like that. So what is your long-term trajectory? You mentioned nationals this year. You mentioned 2025, going back your third round with Endless Mountains. Mm-hmm. I think that's going to be, Rootstock's going to talk a lot more about that. I think that's going to be a big race. I think that's more than 5 days. I'm guessing. I've heard rumors of the size of the race it's going to be.
Yeah, I think I heard it was like 7, which to me, I'm like, are they going to make us do basically shuttle runs in Vermont where we go from the bottom to the top to the bottom to the top?
There's your 7th day. Start climbing. Well, for you, it must be great. So it's basically in your backyard.
Yes, and I'm trying to get my friend Neil, who otherwise might not be into 5-day, but he is being very enticed by being able to be in his playground, and by the. I don't think he has a fear of the unknown, but he will know, like when we get the maps, he has been to so many places and so many corners of Vermont. He has that level of comfort of like, they're not going to throw anything at me that I haven't seen, at least something similar.
There's a bit of having a home field advantage.
Yeah, he'll know where all the general stores are for snackies.
I had the opportunity to ride from the southern tip of Vermont to the northern tip of Vermont on a gravel bike, about 300 or so miles. Be a tourist ad for Vermont. Tell us why people should come train in Vermont.
There's a lot of hills. There's a lot of steep hills, very, punchy, but also long hills. I think the gravel roads. One of my favorite parts about being with Neil is biking, and he frequently just has these outbursts of joy of, oh my God, we are so lucky to be on this road and see what we're seeing. And he draws it out of you. He draws out the joy, even if you're a little tired from all of the hills of like, we are lucky human beings to be in this place.
It's a beautiful place to race, beautiful place to live.
Yeah. The bits of fog or clouds that are in the hills. I like hiking in trees. I remember my dad, he spent a lot of time out west and he felt claustrophobic in Vermont because he could never get above the trees. But I feel comforted and nestled and held by the valleys and by the trees.
You have nationals, you have Endless Mountains next year. What will you do? What will your winter training look like? What do you do between nationals and between Endless Mountains? Do you do a lot of outdoor stuff in terms of the snow, in terms of skiing, climbing, things like that?
I haven't recently. I've kind of pulled back to some being on the trainer, and then at least last year, and it has served me somewhat well, kind of gone back to CrossFit in the winter months, just to have that regularity and the consistency no matter what the weather is. Obviously with climate change too, she's thrown us a curveball with quality of snow and whatnot. I also have an old rugby knee that doesn't necessarily like a downhill like it used to. But I think my goal for this year, because I wasn't doing expedition races, was with Jen to try to get faster at the shorter races. And I think
well, clearly it's paying off. You had a great longest day.
Yeah, I think that's working. And so I think, and I feel like, even though I've taken a break, I took a break from her being the coach in the wintertime. I didn't go all the way back down, right? It's a step. So I think this winter is probably focusing a little bit more on not losing some of the more AR specifics. So maybe it's more treadmill, more bike trainer, more rower, just to kind of keep that piece up and to make sure that when I pick back up with her in, say, February, I'm starting at a higher clip than I was in 2024.
Well, that's always the big training challenge, right? Is when you want to rest, you want to give your body a chance to sort of recuperate from a busy race season, but how far should you go before you begin to turn it back on again? And for the older athlete too, that if you go deeper into that hole, it's harder to climb back out of it.
Yeah, I'm trying to build. And I feel like that's happening and my body is happier. I think I can't go too long without doing some sort of physical activity just from a mental health standpoint. Like I'll start to feel the stress build at work if I, go more than 3 days without getting some sort of sweat, heart rate thing. So that's always critically important. And then I think I haven't figured out what 2025 looks like. I think I mentioned to you before we hit the record, I'm turning 50, milestone year. So I don't know what's on the list. I would like to do an international something.
You have worlds.
We have worlds.
And that's the thing is that if the being 50 and being fit and having all that capacity, you're adventure ready, right? So you could drop into a bigger race because ITERA's coming back, I believe, in 2025, right? And I can't say enough about that. I mean, James Thurlow did ITERA with Open Adventures, did ITERA, handed off to Paul McGreal with Dirty Events. They just said ITERA Light, great race. I mean, if anybody out there is looking to dip their toe in the international racing waters, ITERA is a great. I've done it twice. And for the listener, there's no affiliation with the Dark Zone other than the fact that I'm a huge fan of ITERA. I'm a huge fan of racing in that part of the world, which is, it's Scotland, it's Wales, it's England, it's Ireland. And so that's a great race to sort of get your feet into the water for a big international race.
Yes. I also have a strong connection to South America. I've spent a lot of time there and would like to maybe head back down there. I think I'm relatively fluent in Spanish, so hopefully that would be a skill that I could offer to a team.
I mean, to go back down and do, Guadacinci, with Santiago. There's races now in Brazil. There's races now in Paraguay. I mean, and that's one thing too for the listener out there. There are so many races, so many places to go, so many things to do with some advanced planning, right? And it's weird for us it's amazing how you begin to think in years for races, right? The fact that I'm going to race in a year from now, I'll be down doing that thing, and I think it's great to have that level of fitness that you have, that you could drop yourself into an experience like that and do well enough that you really have a great time.
Yes. No, I mean, that's my hope. But it's a lot to balance between work and the seasonality of work. I know you have that issue, there's budget season, like me deciding to leave for, 10 days during budget season is not going to be great.
Nope.
I'm really proud, but my wife was elected mayor of Burlington this year. So
I like how you write that in. By the way, it's like minute 59. You dropped that in, so good job.
In case she listens, and that's been an added. It's great to see her on her own trajectory of growth and doing hard things. But that's another thing that we now have to balance as two people with hard jobs,
young children, right? You
want to do self-care. Yes,
right, exactly. All these things you have going on there. So, it's finding the time to go and do those things, having the mental space, the training space, things like that.
All of that. So I won't be surprised because the universe always does this, but maybe something will just drop into my lap if I put it out there that I want my 50s to. I want there to be a good lead up to my 50s. And then, once I turn 50, then I'm going to qualify for team 50-60, which is really, I've been doing this just to get on that team. So. Right.
And hang around long enough to be team 60-70 eventually. So keep hanging around with those guys.
Exactly. Well,
listen, Megan, you've been a wonderful guest. You lived up to your billing. I knew you would be very strong to bring on the show. I always like to give the guests sort of the closing comment, the closing thought, recognizing that there's a newer adventure racer out there listening to the podcast. So many people finding the show, going back, listening to the catalog. What was the thing that you wish somebody said out loud on the show when you were a beginning racer? What message do you want to leave people with?
It's not so much about the physical. I think it's what you have to learn about yourself. Like you don't even know what you're going to learn about who you are inside. Do it, get started. You're going to be okay. Your teammates are going to take care of you. And then just keep yourself open and curious to what may be around the next corner, whether it's the checkpoint or some additional lessons, life lessons.
Well, there you have it, folks. Another episode of the Dark Zone Adventure Racing Podcast. Thanks for being here. We hope you enjoyed Megan and all that she had to offer. If you like what you hear on the Dark Zone, please head over to your platform of choice and like and click and subscribe. The algorithm likes that. And remember, if you keep racing, we'll keep talking.